In this video, I'm going to take you through my favorite decision-making framework that's going to enable you to make more effective decisions in your life and business. And the best part about this framework is you can use it for big decisions that you really need to think out and process, as well as everyday choices that cause you to overthink and procrastinate and avoid the things you know you need to do. What you need to understand first, though, is the way that most people live their life is that choices are based on what they want in the moment, that in the now comfort or pleasure or satisfaction or avoiding pain. What they're overlooking, though, is they're essentially picking what they want now at the expense of what they want most. The reality is, though, every action and decision you take has a longer term consequence. And that's why the framework that I'm going to take you through is what is known as the order of consequences. Let me give you a really easy health example to put this into perspective. So let's imagine there's a guy called Gary, and at the end of the long day, he wants a bar of chocolate because it makes him feel good. Now, if that was the full story, Gary has his chocolate bar and is happy. But let's say he keeps doing this every single day. The long-term consequence of that could be is the second order is Gary, who struggled with his weight most of his life, continues gaining weight. The third is he struggles with confidence and he holds himself back in his career. The fourth is he doesn't set the right example for his kids and can't provide for his family. The fifth is he dies young with health problems. Now, this example is no doubt going to the extreme, but it illustrates the point. Every action and decision, even if it seems inconsequential, can have huge long-term ramifications. And this is why if you want to start developing the mindset of a highly effective CEO, you have to start thinking 5 steps ahead, where you make decisions based on where you want to get to, not just on where you are. I'll give you a personal example of the first time I did this. You see, when I first started my company and before I learned about mindset or any of this, I was at a point where I came out of the corporate world. I was bootstrapping this business. And for the first 12 months, truth be told, things were not going very well. I didn't know how to generate leads. I didn't know how to make sales or get revenue, and I essentially felt like I was banging my head against the wall, not making any progress. At the time, I was following a company who helped businesses exactly like mine. I watched their testimonials, went through their case studies, and I was convinced that they could help me figure this out. I got on a call with them, went through it all, and at the end of it, the guy was like, okay, it's going to be $10,000 for us to do this. And at the time, that just felt like an insurmountable amount of cash. I was broke from bootstrapping this business. I was nearly out of cash. I knew that I only had enough runway before I was going to have to throw in the towel. And it just seemed like something that couldn't be done. And I remember I went and spoke to my parents and friends, and all of them said to me, this is too big of a risk. What if it fails? What if it doesn't work out? You see, in this situation, they were all focused on that first order consequence, which was the perceived gain and things that could go wrong. What I did though, and like I said, I didn't know this framework at the time, it was just my way of processing it. I went and I looked at what would happen if I did or didn't do it. Well, if I didn't get help, I would continue struggling on my own. The consequence of that is I probably wouldn't get right. I'd run out of cash and spend the next 6 months going around in circles. The consequence of that is I'd have to throw in the towel and go and get a job. The consequence of that is I'd give up on the dream and the goal that I had. I looked at it from the other angle though, and if I faced an initial barrier, the consequence of that is I could hopefully start figuring out my marketing and sales. I could then start generating some revenue. I could start helping people and making the impact I wanted. I could then start creating the life and freedom that I desired. By playing it out into the future, it was clear to me I had to find a way to make this happen. So I went and got a loan and funded it. And if I didn't do that, you probably wouldn't be listening to this now. The reason I share this is, like I said, if you want to make effective decisions, you can't afford just to focus on that first order consequence because in that situation, it's always going to seem like a bad idea. Someone who's amazing at doing this is Elon Musk. Regardless of how you may feel about him on a personal level, there's no denying the impact and success that he's had on the world. But if you look back through his history, there's so many times in the media where people tear him apart. They say he's making stupid decisions, he's being reckless, it's all going to blow up. And then you look a year or 18 months down the line, and he's had this incredible success. The reason why he's able to do that is he's thinking 5 steps ahead. He plays it out and he's willing to take that short-term loss or go through that discomfort and pain because he knows that is what's going to get him to where he wants to be. And this is so important to recognize because nothing you want is easy. Every goal and target and thing you're trying to achieve is going to require sacrifice. And that doesn't mean being reckless, but when you start focusing on the future and you figure out where you're trying to get to, that's going to become so much easier to make decisions based on the outcome you're trying to create. Whereas if you're always focusing on that first order consequence, it's going to keep you playing small. And at the end of the day, you're never going to be a huge success in life and business if you're always playing not to lose instead of to win. So, I want to give you one other example about this in a business context with something that you'll probably be able to relate to. Let's say you have a member of your team who's really underperforming. They're toxic, they're bringing the team down. But one of the things that you struggle with is having tough conversations and you don't want to face this head on. So, if we look at the first order consequence of you dealing with this conversation, if you don't handle it, what the next consequence is this person's going to continue underperforming. The consequence of that is they're going to keep bringing down morale and being toxic for the rest of the team. The consequence of that is your A players may leave and go somewhere else. The consequence of that is you're going to lose revenue and growth. Whereas if we look on the other way, you facing that tough conversation, by dealing with it, you can get that toxic member out of your team. You can then get someone in who actually performs. The morale in your team can go up. You can then hit your revenue sales and drive growth. Again, by looking at what you have to gain or lose, then it becomes a lot easier to face the thing that you were putting off. Because by just looking at what you want to do, it's always going to feel like something you don't want to face. So this is the framework that you can use for big life decisions. The way I advise it is, if you like writing stuff down and journaling, get a pen and paper, put the decision at the top of the page, and then write, okay, what is the consequence of me not doing this? What is the consequence of that, of that, of that? And you can work your way out as far as you can. Then do it the other way. What is the consequence of me doing this? And so on. That's going to give you the clarity and insight you can then use to make a more informed decision on the outcome and results that you want. So, like I said, that's for the top level big life and business decisions. But what about everyday choices that you're facing? Well, again, this is a framework that I use daily to really help guide me in the actions that I'm taking. Because whenever you're faced with something you don't want to do, you're procrastinating, you're avoiding, you're putting it off. And again, what most people are doing is they're avoiding that discomfort that comes with the first order consequence. So, the way around that is you stop and ask yourself, what is the consequence of me doing or not doing this? I'll give you another example. I was on a coaching call and with one of the clients I was working with, he told me that for the last 3 days, he'd been procrastinating over doing this legal document. It wasn't a lot of work, but it was something that he found boring and he just didn't want to do it. I asked him, like, what is the consequence of you not getting this done today? Well, he knew that if he didn't finalize it, he was then just going to be at dinner that night thinking about how he still didn't get it done. That was going to annoy his wife. He wasn't going to be present for his kids. He was then probably going to be lying in bed all night thinking of this thing they still needed to do. The next day, he'd then need to contact a legal firm saying it still wasn't done and then pay them to finalize it. And by looking at that, he sent me a message after our call and he was like, I've got it done. Because he looked at the future pain he was going to be in and that discomfort, and he didn't want to go through that, which allowed him then to take action on the thing he was putting off. Another example is there was a client I was working with who she was doing amazingly well. She was performing higher. And then all of a sudden, she went through a period where her energy just started to slump. And we started breaking down what was happening. And what I uncovered was her and her husband had started binge watching a new show on Netflix. They got really into it. And every night they were just cramming in another couple of episodes. And as a result, she was going to bed later, not sleeping enough. And this is why her energy and focus was suffering. So again, she used this mindset framework when it came to putting that on. When they wanted to hit play next, she would stop and ask herself, what is the consequence of me watching this right now? Well, I'm going to go to bed late, not sleep as well. I'm not going to be as focused tomorrow, which then allowed her to make a more informed choice. Because sometimes you're going to want it. Sometimes you're going to want to have that burger. You're going to want to do whatever it is, because you can use this in health, business, or everything else, but then make it a conscious decision where you're choosing it because you actually want it, not just because it feels good in the moment. Another example is one of my clients hit a slump where she had a period that her energy and focus was down, that come 3 p.m., she was feeling absolutely exhausted. And when I started diving into it, what I uncovered is that her and her husband had started binge watching a new show on Netflix. They got really into it, and I'm sure you know what it's like where you just want to know what's happening next. So they kept saying, pushing play next. And this meant that she was going to bed later. As a result, she wasn't sleeping as well. And this is why she was tired and her productivity was suffering. So So again, she used this mental framework. When it came time to watch the next episode, she would stop and think about her decision and ask herself, what is the consequence of me doing this? Well, I know I'm going to go to bed later. I'm then not going to sleep as well. And because of that, I'm not going to be as effective tomorrow. That allowed her then to make a more informed decision based on the actions that she wanted to take. Final example is I had a client who, during a fundraising period, he was doing a lot of dinners with investors where they'd have a few drinks every evening. And he found whenever he had any alcohol, the next day he had brain fog and he just wasn't being productive or as effective as he wanted to be. So for him, he needed to make the decision of, in the moment, it's looking at what is the consequence. If I have these extra couple of drinks, is it worth me suffering tomorrow? And that allowed him then to make a better decision on the action he was going to take in the moment. You see, I'm all about balance and enjoying life, so I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. And instead, this framework is about helping you to make more informed decisions. Because if you're in that situation, you want to stay up late, you want to have that burger, that drink, whatever it is, and you really want it, then make it a conscious decision. Great. But then it's not a negative because it's something you've chosen to do. Whereas going back to what I told you originally, the way that most people just live life, they want it, it's in the moment, so they have it without any thought about what they're giving up or the consequences that come as a result of it. So there you have it, my favorite mental framework that you can use to make better decisions in your life and business. Start implementing this today, and going to have a far easier time, not just making the right choices, but also following through with everything else you need to get done.